And so I would think it would be established in a second document. If you establish in this document and you want to amend it, you can have to go back to council as opposed to our RDC to amend that plan of operation. So I'm really at a loss here as to what's intended to do.
It's just this last sentence that I have issues with.
Yeah, and I understand.
It's kind of like an announcement, basically, hereby established.
And I understand your question, and it's right on point. And so I'm asking those people in the room, not you, those people in the room who are developing the energy policy, where does the energy office get established?
In 2013.
Ms. Barbara, hello, Honorable Freeland. Section 14, Digi, Navajo Energy Office, yeah, yes, so perhaps that needs to be up front, like Honorable Freeland is recommending.
Yes, it needs to be put up front then, if that's the case, because what you say here is you're making the announcement that the establishment is within the DNR. So plan of operation, everything should be up front rather than in the back. Just a recommendation, thank you.
Okay, Honorable Ms. Khan.
Members of the Resources Committee and your colleagues who are also here in the chambers and the Navajo Nation staff who is here for to explain this policy. If you will recall, there is currently a legislation in which goes before the Resources and Development Committee. And in that resolution, it establishes the office within the Division of Natural Resources, and it cites this particular resolution that will be amended, but it references this particular resolution. And I'm trying to find that particular resolution within the DIB network, and it explains how the energy policy says it will be set up. And I'll bring that up, and then you can see it is currently at a table status, as if I recall, Shammy, in the Resources and Development Committee's works. If the new, well, I'll bring it up. I'll find it.
Thank you. Welcome, Honorable Daniels. So, any other questions? Mr. D? Okay. Ms. McGay?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, the Energy Office was in the 2013 energy policy that directed the nation to establish the energy policy. So that's already in the works. If you look at your Navajo Nation Council agenda that's posted, the energy policy, the amending CO 5013 to authorize the creation of the Energy Office within the Division of Natural Resources. That's legislation 027319. That's in the policy. That's in the works now. So under your proposed amending the 2013 language, we're not talking about the creation of the office because the nation's already moving forward with that. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. D?
My policy analyst from the office can probably do it better, can explain it better than I can. If you would, E.J. John.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is E.J. John. I'm a policy analyst with the Office of Navajo Government Development. And I don't have the copy of all the amendments that's up on the screen, but looking at the Exhibit A that's in the printout that I got from Shammy, the policy makes reference to the Energy Office, but doesn't specifically lay out how it was going to be established, like a real plan of operation, like what we're thinking of an office. So I think it would be good to, if not put it in this policy to reference the legislation that's going through the process right now to establish the energy office that Shami talked about and also Ms. Khan talked about. Of course, there's issues referencing an office that legislation that hasn't gone through yet, but establishing the office in its own legislation and then just reference it from this policy might be a way to address that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. RDC, any questions? My legislation that was tabled, it talks to this energy office. But having spoke with Mr. President, it will be the renewable energy office as well. That will be pretty much forthcoming. Honorable Freeland, that was a really good point that you brought up. So from that section 14 again to 13, some of that wording probably should be in this section of scope and review, or bring that office part up front rather than in that section of the later part. Michelle?
Thank you, Chair, and members of RDC. We certainly can do that. We're amenable to that. And moving section 14, either maybe right after section 12 or section 2. We're open to that.
Honorable Freeland, would you like some clarification on all of this now? I don't know.
Okay, well, if Michelle says they're open to it, then that's something we can work on. It's just a little backwards. I don't want to say backwards, but it's a little, it should be defined up front where this paragraph states it. This jumps right into hereby the energy office is established. How's it established, or where is it established, or where's the basis of the establishment? So that was my question.
Michelle?
Chair and Delegate Freeland, we could also move, like as I mentioned, move section 14 right after section 12 or 2 and move this statement or this paragraph into which would be section 3 if you think it's, if you think it would read well that way.
Vigo? Thank you, Michelle. So we'll work on that, Melinda. Any other questions? Dana?
Let's take a look at what you're doing here. You are amending a statute or legislation that already established an energy office. Okay? So it's already established. You're now amending the plan, what's in there about the energy office. So stating in this legislation that you're creating the energy office is a little weird because you've already created it. It already exists. So I'm not sure that language needs to be included. It could say the energy offices include, provide for an energy office. Adding that word, it's creating and or such is really, or establishing it, it's already established. It's a little weird.
Thank you, Dana.
What?
Rowena?
Well, what about?
Thank you, Chair and members of RDC. My comment is, well, it's my question first. Is it the intent of the Navajo Nation to only have the energy office be designated as the entity that makes changes to the energy policy? And only that entity?
It shouldn't.
Okay, then under section 2, scope and review, then I think that third paragraph is misplaced because that's what it's saying by putting in that the energy the energy office will be able to make changes to the energy policy. If it's more than just the energy office that's able to make changes to the energy policy, then why are we just talking about the energy office is going to be make changes to the energy policy under the scope and review?
Thank you for your question. Resources and Development Committee, according to Title II, is the oversight over energy. So energy will be under our authority as Resources and Development Committee. Any energy has to come before RDC. RDC is the clearinghouse according to the law that is written. It hasn't been changed. It's still written as it is. So just to remind you and all, is that what you're asking also?
No, I just think that, I understand that, but if you put that paragraph 3 under the scope and review, it makes it sound like that it's only the energy office that has the authority to make amendments to the energy policy. I think it's just a bit misplaced within the document.
Thank you. Dr. Shabala?
Untitled Minerals Department, Rowena. It says here, the Navajo Energy Office may propose amendments to the Navajo Energy Policy through the Division of Natural Resources to the Resources and Development Committee for. So, on the it's not just on the Energy Office. They may propose through DNR to RDC.
Thank you. Melinda?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Dr. Shabala and Minerals Department for providing that. So in the third paragraph of Section 2, the wording, we didn't strike out anything, but we put the Navajo Energy Office is hereby established within the Division of Natural Resources with appropriate staffing and budget. The Navajo Energy Office, with the approval of the Resources and Development Committee, may propose amendments to the Navajo Energy Policy through the Division of Natural Resources to the Resources and Development Committee for consideration and final approval. So I think I just worded that twice, but it does state in there. But if it still reads to Minerals Department as different, maybe you can kind of let us know where in the wording you would like to see the approval process, and that the Energy Office wouldn't be the only office to make changes to the policy?
Rowena?
I was just providing comments as to the placement of the language. I didn't have any recommendations for changes.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Michelle?
Thank you, Chair. That section, the reason why we worded it that way is two things. One is that it just shows that the Energy Office has the ability to recommend changes to Division of Natural Resources and RDC and the Council if need be. It just gives them that ability. They're not the sole office that would make those changes. The other thing is that the reason why we put it in the wording the way it is, where it says it would go through the Division of Natural Resources to the RDC, or the Resources and Development Committee for consideration, is, as one of the members had stated, we didn't want a director to go rogue and propose all kinds of different language and changes to various sections. So they would have to get sort of approval through the Division of Natural Resources Administration Office. So that's why we worded it in that way.
Thank you. Michelle? Ms. Bobroff, this Section 2 scope and review, the last paragraph, where it states, the Navajo Energy Office may propose amendments to the Navajo Energy Policy through the Division of Natural Resources to the Resources and Development Committee for consideration and final approval by Navajo Nation Council. If Resources and Development Committee has authority to be the oversight over energy, wouldn't the approval stop at RDC? My question, Ms. Barbara.
Thank you. I am going to defer to Mariana to answer that question.
Thank you. Ms. Khan?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, if the office is put under the Division of Natural Resources, the Division of Natural Resources plans of operation are approved by Resources and Development Committee because they're the oversight. And that is how, okay, too many things going in, but that would be where ordinarily any division gets created under the Division of Natural Resources goes to the Oversight Committee, which is Resources and Development Committee. With this extra language there, that would preempt Resources and Development Committee from approving plans of operation for this particular office within the Division of Natural Resources. It says here then, and the whole council would vote on it, that it goes to the whole council. So you are right, ordinarily, any division or department that has a plan of operation to be enacted or to be amended would go just to RDC. But this particular language would make it go all the way to the council for it to approve, the whole council to approve for this particular office.
Mariana? And aside from the plan of operation for the energy, aside from the plan of operation for the energy office, the rest of the energy policy, will it, if it gets amended, will it have to go back to council if this language wasn't included?
Ms. Khan?
Mr. Chair and Ms. Barbara, it depends on how this legislation is written. The policy itself is written on the amendment portion, which is usually at the very end of the legislation, which will tell the manner in which the whole policy can be amended. And in the previous policies, the whole Navajo Nation Council amends the whole policy.
But Mariana, this is, I don't think I'm articulating this. What I'm asking is take out what was in the, pretend that there's nothing in the legislation or the prior legislation that says who is going to amend it. So we're starting with a blank slate. With the blank slate, would it go just to RDC or would it have to go to the council?
If it is placed within the Division of Natural Resources.
No, not the plan of operation, okay? The rest of the energy policies.
Oh, the rest,
Yeah, the rest,
the whole thing.
the whole thing.
My understanding is it goes to the whole council. The whole policy goes to the whole council.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
my understanding. And
And so if it has to go to the full council to be approved in the first place, then the council legislation council could delegate back to the Resources Committee to do future amendments?
they could, the council could, yes.
And so.
It could, the whole council could reference particular provisions that would go to, that could go to the Resources and Development Committee to amend and keep certain portions with the whole council to amend. I've seen that in previous legislation. Or the whole thing could go to a particular our oversight committee, RDC. That is something to be voted upon by the whole council.
Thank you. RDC, Nidal Kiddush. Good with it? Honorable Freeland? No, no. Honorable Daniels, anything? Kushina? We'll move along. Melinda?
Good afternoon, thank you, Chair. So moving down from the third paragraph of Section 2, we're into Section 3, definitions. Section 301 reads, "The following terms are defined for the purposes of this document. Electricity generating facilities includes facilities that burn fossil and biomass to fuels to generate electricity. Facilities that convert renewable resources to electricity, such as wind, solar, geothermal, and hydroelectric. And facilities generating electricity through nuclear fusion or fission for use on the nation and for export for use off the nation." Electricity transmission infrastructure includes high voltage and distribution transmission lines, substations, and related infrastructure. That's the end of page 5. Bullet point C. If there's any questions, Chair?
Mr. D?
No, committee members, there's a bit of a contradictory statement in that last under definition that she just read, where it reads, generating electricity through nuclear fusion or fission for use on the nation and for export use off the nation. So if you have a moratorium on uranium, which is how you or how one creates energy through nuclear fusion or fission, are we dealing with a contradiction there if there's a moratorium?
Dr. Shabala?
Thank you, Ed. This is just definitions. It doesn't have anything to do, my opinion, with what we say is good or not good. Moratorium. They're just simply definitions. Of fusion or fission.
It nevertheless implies.
I disagree.
Mr. D? Bin Aiden Kirigish Bikiti Tiangate Alban Kitlana.
So we're talking about here, I want to go back to EJ.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. When you're developing policy, you have to kind of predict the future. You have to see what we can't see today. When you interpret statutes, anything that even makes a reference to nuclear, see, that implies that we're okay with uranium and everything that goes along with it. So if there's any way to clarify that position, even in our definitions, we have to make sure we think those through and make sure that there's no chance. If we don't want an implication there, then we have to make sure that those implications aren't there.
Thank you. Section 3, Shananta, it talks to definitions. Ha'ila ol yesad. Section 301, because the following terms are defined for the purposes of this document, Nela. Electricity generating facilities, Nela. Includes facilities that burn fossil and biomass fuels to generate electricity. Semicolon. Facilities that convert renewable resources to electricity, such as wind, solar, geothermal, and hydroelectric. And facilities generating electricity through nuclear fusion or fission for use on the nation and for export for use off the nation. So this is just, Ms. Barbara, could you expound on this?
Chair, I'm going to once again refer
Okay.
Defer to Mariana.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, this is the definition section true. And reference to the nuclear fusion or fission, which current Navajo Nation law has been brought up, we can't transport it. It's not allowed to be transported across the nation. And I don't know exactly the year in which that particular legislation was passed. It was around 2014, 2015. I don't know. I don't have that before me. So this is a definition. It does not allow it by itself to define it in this section. It is essentially being brought up as a policy matter. Do you want to mention it? It's just, at this point, a policy matter. You could put it in or you could take it off for your purposes of definition. But in the definition section, it is a definition. It's a definition of electricity generating facilities. That there's no, currently, it is not, I haven't read where it begins to act. Right now, it is being defined, and it is up to the council whether they want to put that in the definition.
Thank you. Michelle?
Thank you, Chair. My comment is that when you read the paragraph as you did earlier, and you stop at the semicolon, and then you go on to for use on the nation and for export for use off the nation. So in this case, burn fossil and biomass fuels to generate electricity for use on the nation and for export for use off the nation. That wording there is not specific to nuclear. I understand what Mr. D was mentioning, but it's just a definition. It encompasses all of these different resources that are utilized to generate electricity.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Appreciate your question there, Mr. D. Any other questions, RDC? Ms. Melinda?
Thank you, Chair. Moving on to letter C, fuel minerals including petroleum, parentheses, example oil, natural gas, helium, and associated liquids and gases, parentheses, coal, coal bed methane, rare metals, cross out uranium, and any derivatives or associated minerals. Do we have any comments or edits on that section? Okay, so the strike through was letter D, and what it read was large-scale energy developments includes parentheses A, parentheses, electricity generating facilities with capacity of 1.0 megawatt or greater, parentheses B, parentheses, energy-related facilities utilizing 5 acres of land or more, and C, transmission lines or pipelines extending more than 500 feet. So letter D was strike through, and it's no longer in the document. The next line reads, high voltage includes 69 kV and higher. And the following letter E, pipelines includes oil and gas pipelines, coal slurry lines, and related compression and pumping infrastructure. And this concludes section 3. Chair.
Ms. Barbara? The strikeover of D, could you expound on that whole paragraph there, large-scale energy developments?
Thank you. What I can basically expound on is that you are still in your definition section, and the group that put this together determined to take out the definition of large-scale energy development. I cannot speak to their reasoning, but it's just a definition section. It's not changing the substance. So you might ask, Chair, you might ask them why it was taken out.
Okay. Michelle?
Thank you, Chair. We didn't want to, we being the Haayoołkááł Group, did not want to limit it just to large-scale energy developments. And we were looking more in terms of renewable energy. So we were looking to encompass all energy projects. We just didn't want to define only the large scale.
Okay, so the last part where it says B, energy-related facilities utilizing 5 acres of land or more. I understand that solar projects require more than 5 acres, so that's probably one of the reasons, right? Because 5 acres is very little to put up solar projects, and you need more than that. Although, instead of the 1 megawatt or greater, all that is just what the definition entails, large-scale energy developments, correct? Right. Mr. Honorable Begay?
Thank you, Chair. My question will be like right now we're thinking about 69 kV and higher because so we know that the nation is giving that 500 megawatts to be a transmission call. When we talk about transmission, we'll be talking about the height. Is there anything that has to do with, or the permits allowed, or is it something that deals with energy? Because I know that it's there's something that's limited.
Are you talking about wind turbines?
Wind turbines and also the 500 megawatts and the structures issue. Is there anything that's pertaining to that?
Okay. Michelle? April?
Thank you, Chair. So with respect to transmission lines, what we enter into are rights-of-way agreements. If it's a transmission line, if it was a wind project, then there would be a lease having to do with that particular project. I'm not sure if our rights-of-way talk about height of transmission lines or anything. I'm looking at minerals. I don't believe. Yeah, it's just the width of the right-of-way, because you're talking about how much land is going to be included in the right-of-way. So we don't talk about height.
Thank you. Rowena?
I was just agreeing with April and just saying we just talk about width, not height. We talk about like 16-inch, 32-inch, and higher. So as you get, the diameter gets larger, of course, not just the width, but height of it on the pipeline would be taking place.
Thank you. Mr. Alona?
A lot of those standards are established by industry. And in the review, there'll be decisions made by industry and by the standards such as Raptor considerations and so forth. So those will be put into the condition of the approval of heights and so forth and how they must be constructed.
So, Mr. Alona, would something like that, the concern raised by Honorable Begay, should it be written into this policy?
Like you could say according to industry standards.
Michelle?
Thank you, Chair. Again, it's only definition. It just defines what high voltage means. So under the transmission section is where you can actually describe in more detail the language that you're wanting as far as height. And as Mr. Halona spoke to earlier, there's where you can say per industry standards. Then you'll have the question of, okay, what's industry standards? So we'll have to reference that.
Ms. Khan?
If there is going to be a restriction on height, you said the transmission section, which part of this document would that be in? I'm just trying to anticipate language for that. Would that be 13, 12? Okay.
In section 13? Okay. Section 13, Haayoołkááł. Honorable Freeland?
Thank you, Chair. I just kind of skimmed through this, and I apologize for I was on a took a call earlier. I'm just thinking about other regulations and laws that are guidelines we have to potentially abide by. And one that comes to mind is NEPA. Skimming through the document, it doesn't reference NEPA, or it doesn't reference NAGPRA, it doesn't reference any of those sort of federal laws potentially that we could have to abide by to gain rights-of-ways, or to gain access to rights-of-ways, or environmental clearances, FONSIs. There's no discussion of, or no indication of that. And I think of our side, especially because we get state money, and we have to get, our chapters have to get rights-of-ways. And sometimes it involves going through multiple jurisdictions, and then sometimes it involves abiding by NEPA. So I kind of skimmed through the document, and do we have to include that language at some point in this document? Do we have to include when we go after rights-of-ways for a transmission line? If we have to make sure there's no arc sites, no graves, or we don't want to disturb anything? Just thinking in that aspect, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. April?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Delegate Freeland. I actually did bring this up to the work group. Maybe we should mention federal law, but I kind of talked myself out of it because federal law governs no matter what. We don't have to say that federal law governs. It's the overarching law that we do have to comply with, just generally speaking. So if you want to include something in here that says, we will abide by all applicable federal laws, then that's fine. But it's not, I don't think it's necessary.
Honorable Freeland?
I think if we're creating a policy holistically that's going to be utilized by the entire Navajo Nation, I think we should put something in there that indicates that, because, federal law is federal law, like you just said, April, and NEPA is there for a reason, is to protect, resources, or to protect the areas of undisturbance, and then also NAGPRA, we have arc sites, especially in Eastern, we have so many arc sites out there. We want to leave those undisturbed as much as possible. So if this is going to be a reflection or a policy of the entire whole Navajo Nation, whenever I think of Navajo, just to go back, I think of just the trust site, Big Navajo, and we have such a disadvantage on Eastern because of the land statuses. So that's why I'm thinking of in this way of why is there any reference to NEPA or NAGPRA or any of the federal laws. So just a thought.
Thank you. Michelle?
Thank you, Chair. For Delegate Freeland's question, if you look under section 601, it talks about the nation's laws and regulations. There you can include the word federal, that it applies to federal and the Navajo Nation's laws and regulations. And you could outline what you're referencing. So we can expand more in this section about your comments.
I guess, Chair, I guess I bring this up because I would like to see this policy as strong as possible and have as much substance as possible. So if any questions do arise of rights of ways or clearances or whatever, that they could look at this and say, you know what, we have to abide by federal law according to our energy policy. Or we can reference our energy policy for some sort of development or something. I don't know, I'm just thinking, I guess when I saw the definitions piece, that's what came to mind, is where are the references to the federal regulations? So, yeah, Chair.
Ms. Barbara? So this section 601, would that be sufficient? Ms. Barbara?
Thank you. I think that it is sufficient as written, but at the same time, it could probably be beefed up by mentioning the federal regulations. And the reason for that is just giving notice to the, what should we say, the uninformed or the general public.
DOJ?
I agree.
Thank you. Ms. Collin?
Of course, the final decision is by vote of the whole Navajo Nation Council. This particular document is called the Navajo Nation Energy Policy. And if there are I just want to give you all, if there are
Thank you.
something else to think about.
Thank you. Michelle?
Thank you, Chair. Another thing to think about is, or to understand, is that Land Department and General Land Leasing have a process where you have to obtain in order to get a lease. Minerals follows that as well for their rights of ways. So you have these checks and balances, because then it goes through the 164, and you have Fish and Wildlife who checks to see if their biological reports are there. You have HPD who looks at the cultural side. And so all of those are reviewed, and they have to follow these processes that are set up or that are established by Land Department, General Land Leasing, Minerals Department, and so forth. So just keep that in mind as well.
Thank you. Mr. Alona?
Just to also add on, in the Navajo General Leasing Regulations, in order to get any permit, any lease, any withdrawals, it has that information in there of what they must do and how they can do it and how they're able to go through that process. About that.
Thank you, Mr. Alona. Nanta, any other questions on definitions here? I see D, the E is overstrike, says high voltage includes 69 kV. I asked Mr. Handley here what kV means. It's kilovolts. So I don't know if that needs to be written out or just written the way it is. Michelle, is that just the way it's written?
Yeah, it's the way it's written, but the K should be a little k.
A little
Yes.
baby K?
Yes, a baby K.
Okay. Okay, so what about both? Just a K. Just a K will be lowercase and higher. And then E, on definitions, pipelines, it says, includes oil and gas pipelines, coal slurry lines, and related compression and pumping infrastructure. Is that all? Mr. El Sosi?
Thank you, Shanta. We do agree with how it's written for oil and gas.
Is there any other additions to pipelines? But then, yeah. Okay. Melinda?
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for Mr. Halona, Land Department. The General Leasing Act regulations that you mentioned, were any of the information from that act incorporated into this draft? Or would there be any room for that in the areas that we're referring to for the 164 or compliance, or maybe Dr. Shabala can provide insight as well, but do you see anywhere in the document that it could fit, or, because you mentioned the regulations and the Leasing Act, so I just wanted to mention that.
I think if you just mention Navajo Nation rules and regulations, you cover, those general leasing regs, as well as the land withdrawal regulation that was done by the committee after this policy was done, this policy that were amended in 2013. After that, the general leasing regulations was passed. After that, the land withdrawal regulations were passed. And so, yeah, so if you just mention Navajo Nation laws and regulations, it'll encompass those as well, I think, anyway.
Michelle?
I was just going to say we can add it in 601, or maybe you could spell it out, or the types, for example, these are the types of regulations.
Thank you. Nanta, any other questions? We can move on. Next section, Melinda.
Thank you, Chair. Elliot Freeland.
Before we move on, I'm sorry. I'm just thinking, again, I'm going back to the federal piece. We talked about NEPA, I mentioned NAGPRA, I mentioned all the environmental laws. Our brother also did a legislation for the federal, or the Navajo Nation Endangered Species List as well. It kind of mirrors the federal endangered species list. So are we going to abide by that in this energy policy as well? And try to incorporate protection of environment and protection of animals as well in any developments. And also in the 2005 Energy Policy Act, as well as the 2012 HERF, there's mention in there about the terras as well. Was there any discussion with the Haayoołkááł on the terras? How the terras, if you're going to do energy development on Indian lands, you don't have to get the approval of the Secretary of the Interior. So if we're going to start doing energy development, renewable energy, then we can have this on our own. And then there's also the environmental impact side as well to that. We have our own regulations. How does it all tie in?
Michelle?
Thank you, Chair. Delegate Freeland. No, there was no discussion on the terras, which is the Energy Resource Act. I think it's Energy Resource. I don't remember what the A stands for, but I know that there were proposing amendments. There were public hearings at several different places. I haven't heard as to what the finalized draft is and how, if those were passed or not. But in the general land leasing, there is provision to where the nation does approve renewable energy projects. So that's spelled out in the General Leasing Act.
Thank you.
Renewable energy resource agreements.
Yeah.
Abigail, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Melinda?
Okay, moving to the next section. Section 4 reads the Navajo Fundamental Law, and I did get the statement from Navajo Government Development. I can't put it on the big screen because I don't have the email access, but within this section, the question is going to be whether we want to include some of this verbiage, because you can do it twice, where you can have some of the wording from what we just received from government development in the preamble, as we discussed with Delegate Begay, and then we can repeat it again here in section 4, so that would be up to the group. But right now, just to read section 4 itself, section 01, chapter 2 of the Navajo Nation Code, entitled The Foundation of Diné Law and Diné Government, describes the 4 sacred elements of life as air, light, fire, water, and earth pollen, and provides that in all their forms, they must be respected, honored, and protected, for they sustain life. Second paragraph, section 402, before commencement of any large-scale energy development or other projects utilizing the nation's energy resources, the Navajo Heritage and Historic Preservation Department may be consulted to ensure the proper ceremonies, prayers, and other rituals are conducted to maintain the Navajo people's great covenant with the deities. By doing so, the nation shall strive to maintain a proper balance with the natural world. Chair.
Okay. Honorable Begay, we have all afternoon to discuss this. So, Nanta, Naidiskit.
Again, Shana, I'm really thankful that that resource development came back and to work on this again, and including some Haayoołkááł group and people that are here with us. I agree with it, but they could have I'm pretty sure it's going to say, where it says that Navajo Heritage and Historic Preservation Department may be, it should be just like, it has to be like that they have to do that, be consulted, so not maybe. Other that's shashin ake needless to that's to shashin iba ake di shan hajoye on nini as on in that no shell because that jando the don't need that. So I don't quite in hinge kid that shinad chair Nez. There's some group that there's some people that I think that they should be consulted. Later, long time attorney general and attorney, and he's the one that created the Navajo Oil and Gas to make that. So I'd like to mention him and honor him today. Recognize him, Louis the Netsosi. I want him to be part of this. Khalid an Khayan sa case today. Lead attorney that you lado hang. But in that is out and sound about this case go. Khalid maybe attorneys and little he can't do this and sound shack. We need help. Adaya Banzas case is it as you call Adon than Hanna did
Honorable Begay, the Kuro Resources and Development Commission and Idan Lenigia. I see you got bedet in the Nagaran that Nahas Tanigi and Hahaki, Nichiadas Tikahut Ocean than his no. A cockro, Mr. Danet Sosi, which Choidish in Lona Bedish Kiltibe has Annie had a det Eheki Ilnego, a bar hot you would that station care of his Nahadine. I don't know about Eastern. Nagere, Mr. D. Auhananata, Quashet is at or Dihut Ocean, did a seal Zethla, Sad Gihut Ashed Ed or the Nath, Noda, Chronican Cargonation that is Hot are the nation needs Dada, Nagay, a lot is the need, our nation needs I, but not aid of his Annie Hadalia, a Kotib has Annie Hadador Nathan Leniki, Ahota, Ahot, fishing. Bilkit na hadid na dohot arshan hida don neglishin. Hot a condidishe korodi Navajo Nation wants to like it a corona has tanigit ba ainilzen. So it is hodeshnant I don't have a hands and Michelle.
Thank you, Chair. Delegate Begay, I appreciate your comment in regards to the Historic and Heritage and Historic Preservation Department. The reason we left it as may be consulted is that there are some communities who prefer a local medicine man to conduct those types of ceremonies, and we didn't feel that that directing them to HPD would be appropriate if that was how they felt or if that's the person that they wanted to utilize. So we left it as maybe consulted.
Dr. Shabala.
Ara do shnant arita nastaniki di ko asa shajagi maybe bakagi do Nishido Hashil Sagon Hasala Bansete case of Delia Shanant Elmer Aro RDC the Nasiniki Ako Oshian Hidid Hasalar to Ebony Nasto at Alia May Oshi Banda Nido Eshibe Di had a don Nilque Fundamental Love. Bandit nido hat khasi don hagata hat nigi ni historic preservation ba ni liago it's a DNR, it's the official department to go through adon le harada a constituent da kado sanin da kai asto are da hon nigi son de kai da hat khasi he da hanodo daro I the anhigi to better hattels da is out and never kaya pakao. What that shouldn't die.
Thank you, Otto. Koroshi and Dr. Fowler.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was a facilitator for this committee and became a member, so I'm learning a lot as we go. Ako di ko ang bayadil ti the Navajo Fundamental Law portion. Aka shin sabo ani o you gon to each case. Don't hear all il. Ado hear that at. So we really wanted more guidance and input from our DOJ. Hashin sabadi de nebehas anin lini ilkit das sohi. Ad en hajo laton hikato chatadi no alt so edelia. Oshin yugo bito soto na bikia do tihinde. Halet ela stuido sani al anit e. Sao edo baya atkit ninde. Eshin laton hinan tini ben nache. Latoshin be hilka dilwal.
Thank you. Honorable Freeland.
Chair, just on the section 402 part, where it does state that the Navajo Historic Heritage and Historic Preservation Department may be consulted to ensure proper ceremonies. Should that maybe be a shall be? Just a thought. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Mr. Halona.
Chair and committee members, again, when a project is being proposed, they have to go to HPD. It's part of the requirements, part of the law. So when they have that project, they do the art clearance. Section 106 is done. When that project's being done, is cleared for Nahasaza, Auto, or cultural, traditional properties. In that process, they're out there talking to the local medicine man, getting oral history. In a report. So it does go to them. It has to go. They issue what's called a cultural resource compliance form. That's the only way that project will move forward because they satisfied the Section 106 aspects. With that, thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Walker.
Chair, committee members, again, the group that's here with us today, just the perspective that I have is listening in the conversation, the discussion, the environmental review processes that are in place currently, what we have in place already are pretty stringent, pretty restrictive. Off the nation, the larger society, debate goes on each and every day, different jurisdictions, debate over whether these environmental review laws and regulations should be stronger or, less strong to allow development, to allow friendly, be friendly to industries that develop energy. Of course, the flip side to that is to protect the environment, the air, water, the plants, birds, and all that. Diki, proponents for that, they want stricter regulations and processes. So Navajo again, This is the focus. We get a chance to decide which way. I been on the shadow that I bet on it as a year as any tabet ziligi. It we get us to Joe what others Benit Johnson about just the debate as you know, we further develop the policy and structure some of these offices. This chambers here will get it, you know, we will come back to this over and over to discuss and debate with leadership just how strong or just how flexible we want our laws and just with respect to energy development. Johnson, Jananta, ko ba hensin ko na hat khanigi jo inda jo tatne benno o jo o ba handa na veje nebenan chidik ido ka ya chada de ne non shido o ba ha de tsi jo kade o ye bika khat ne hegi jo ba hensin Jananta. They went along the same lines as expressed by Delegate Elmer Begay, you know, to allow other individuals or organizations, entities to come in also to participate, to lend that help. You know, we should expect our own divisions, programs certainly, but also our enterprises to come in to lend help. NTUA, you know, they handle energy round the clock, 24/7, year round. So I believe that they are most qualified also to participate in such a discussion. Water resources, though, what the toys of the lot, chong, the lot, pliti, nata. Now, in the sense, the lot, so be la, tochong, indigi, I don't care. You get this, you can start there are other enterprises like transportation, construction, Resource and Development Committee. I don't know what that you didn't like yesterday. I got end, I didn't you catch it. A hassing, a screen, Lizani, the Halchin, or Shendiki, no, but a hot ego had done such a choke, unsound discussion, Mr. Chairman and members of RDC, that or Bakat, Dana, Lebakan, Zunda, and then they thought, you know,
Thank you, Honorable Walker. Honorable Freeland.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate what Che just said, because I totally agree with him on that. And, you know, we should have other professionals helping us with this too. He mentioned NTUA. We brought this up at Twin Arrows. Was that discussion ever held? And, you know, I don't know if we ever got an answer. But beside the point, going back to the maybe situation of Section 402, really I think that should spell out shall be. That way it can make it more strong. It's exactly what Mr. Halona mentioned too, the process of gaining approvals. So HPD should also probably be here. Okay, never mind. I didn't see you at the tail. Robert, my bad. I'm sorry on that one, but they're here. I'm glad they're here.
Okay.
But just to change that maybe to shall be. That way they're informed. Just my thought, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, we'll give time to Mr. Richard Begay here in a while, but Honorable Kiel Begay.
Good afternoon, Senator.
My first time participating in this development of the energy Haninigigi. But there's other reason for me. Like today, I had 2 meetings that I needed to go to. Ibn Aja changed in there. I'm glad that we're discussing the fundamental law. This goes back to the question, I wouldn't be at ease if we're relying on the Navajo Heritage and Historic Preservation Department providing to be consulted. The way I see this is their staff. Yes, but it would be more appropriate unlocked in the end it doesn't necessarily have to be the Navajo Medicine Men's Association, but the local, maybe a language that would say that local, I don't know what the correct term would be, but they didn't have to need has tweet in Liniki to other the she sound the truth on the Ashkasha to ko Edigi la Arch or Gikun Jondo Lichinson. Again, that would be my recommendation. Shinantado, Kudo, Ibn Dash Nishiki, cautious in the Ajo, Bahasi, because if it's just the historical preservation, no, that I don't know who works there. I'm nothing against them. But a lot of times they're doing other jobs. Every day, but their qualification, is based on what the job's title is for. But Kujit Ato Nidiki day-to-day sound history does it so I reserve chair, maybe have the group provide us, or we make a recommendation other than the Navajo Heritage and Historic Preservation Department. I'd like to leave, especially the day fundamental law. I mean, ish auto, she bits auto hot, ish eight, a bitch a channel on quite need the kid or lately gish it. I mean, if it's somebody that totally they're Navajo but fresh out of college, but never live on the Navajo Nation, that they're it couldn't date niche go. I need agent or Haki Kodo, Sato Yato, Zeto Chito, Art, but Japan, she used to the Shane, Ando Ilanel, and but latte. ECG Kodo, energy, Nido, Dada, Queen Shins, Kodo, just select, Sato, Banan, she used to the Quagga Aro, or a with Art, Sato, the Quishin, Sato Yendan, Tino Yahadatse. 80 days with us, just as you know, Bahasito list. I think there would be a different, another group that would need to be mentioned in this particular area for consultation. And then again, even that itself, consultation. I mean, what's the proper way? Kodo, the sun is, I mean, the net, is that really consultation? Or I think there's a proper way to word that as well when we're dealing directly with our local medicine men. So, san has two bed builds in she ki bit da hosen git oh you da holon but again who pesha I see ki aid ko aid ki hot ego from each area with up to need to go shi bonetza ado an hidden this at I ochin to up hanna no the ban ye to up hanna ta or there's a certain area of the geographical of the Navajo Nation have different area of providing input about background about the Native fundamental law. It just adanas at ego kudo bahasito kudo shnai shvela ya united kit did that age regarding the uranium. Aja has energy did all the sabestindas did bedet or sadiki sejala onet sojono aya hatsi dada ko a ebe na shukoti kada but anything if it's the policy itself really should reflect in getting input directly from the Navajo people that may have no knowledge about the government travel system of the Navajo Nation, but more of the traditional aspect.
Chair. Thank you. Mr. Richard Begay. Go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon, I'm Richard Begay, the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Navajo Nation. I'm also the Department Manager for the Heritage and Historic Preservation Department. Tohan Inslado Kapai Basistin, doing the Kachini, the Shanando, Kia Ani, Walyagi, the Sichi. Nidia, Nanjoja, Nanzan, that could have pushed out in some. I'm not quite sure what all of the discussion was here, but I understand there are some concerns about the HPD being involved in the projects here for energy projects. The Historic Preservation Department was authorized or was created under the Cultural Resources Protection Act of 1988. That's when the Tribal Council passed that resolution. So what our responsibility is to ensure that projects, any projects, including energy resources projects, if they're going to disturb the ground, that we make sure they're properly authorized and people who know their job do the survey and talk to the people on the ground. I guess that's a bureaucratic way to say that we need to make sure that all of the areas that are going to be disturbed for projects on the reservation get an archaeological survey. That's really what it means, and that we oversee that and we permit people, archaeologists and ethnographers, to do the work on the Navajo Nation. So if, for instance, if the Energy Office is created and they select a parcel on the Navajo Nation to create a project, like a solar farm or wind farm, we would ask that they have that surveyed first. We are also, my job is also the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, and that means that we have authorization from the National Park Service to act as a Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, and we're required to observe some federal laws, including making sure that federal undertakings, projects that involve federal permits, federal dollars, federal agencies, observe various federal laws, especially here on Navajo Nation. So, having all said that, we also, the Tribal Council, the administration, even the Judicial Department do come to us to ask us to advise them on cultural issues. Our sisters department in the Division of Natural Resources have also come to us for advice. The CRPA, the Cultural Resources Protection Act, doesn't give us the authority to work with authorities, but that's part of my duties to advise the council and the president's office. That's part of my job, and it's specified in there and under CRPA as to be an advisor. So we take that role seriously. And in fact, in the late 80s, we worked with the council then and the administration to create what we call a traditional cultural program. That traditional cultural program deals with sacred items, human remains, and so on. Itala di just bahwinta just nahito jihano. Ado ni hizaz da hegida ni haskrido sani la khasnel khaski da zolia khasins. Ado na museum da plita alia. Ish khado lil no bahwinto. Ita hat khali hakobato need khali sani do streetad. Dan sada hakobato ne diske da ban so case khista bandot in bandot is the petit no. Itala kwaslas leo. Abet's Ado Hatali Advisory Council, petit no Hollywood. ADSG did at the Bistani Lynch. And in fact, about 10 years ago, they finally approved a plan of operation for them. A kohet ada, assist like the Kagurazolia, assist like Kahad aid, a kohakabatni. The Halet Haban so case, but the Nila. The just let that, for example, let that just Paris that not Haistar lad or least what don't need. And that beta no Haita Hasita. You can have those slash what don't need every get out that he'll need. I don't know, last it one Lenigi Grand Canyon, but the Idnis Grand and Glen Canyon Environmental Studies, but no, Adaptive Management Program. $8 Aja the Kuoshi. Nahot eilta hakabato need. Die slow and linigis get aban sa hakes noda. Jo hadan hinan shit a ko the Khaled ala energy offset nigi yakado nili we're a Navajo Nation program jo the banil nastitna. A ko an ni kudan he kaosli din nido bekati lual. Oh at khali the kuishi bahonilzen. Do a Delnes Hakuda Bedi ni House of the Zenhada Yilado, it did a court either Nas Hakubato need on Sankan Hasa, a could arnils for Quaggy had not so good out on hit or need no invitation, but they need Elia. A call her that and Tarsit Abasan Dale, Nashota. Accordida and also in data so this shall and nigi la bihaso. We're happy to work with you. This is our job, this is my job. Dishit na nashota. Because just da sa taish na da esla beslashta. Edo da gate nash ada. So we work together. All of the departments in the division, we work together, even divisions elsewhere. Social services da hakon hitla. So we work with Navajo Nation programs.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Karoshi, Honorable Elmer McKay.
Thank you, Chair. I wrote that Shewedo, Shidina is a bunch, touching by Shin, Yatego. I wrote Quaggy Bonnet in Gido. I wrote Chair, with all due respect, although Haayoołkááł Group, though, you see, just as the brother, that's she yet. Qaida, the Nabadish Kiln Soya, see if we could maybe down Melinda Person that English. The Hado, and then Gido, maybe we could consult with others. Quite a snake on data, she said, as a dado that they can't even Danish, though attorneys and level. Maybe we could up in that how we can consult when it comes to this one. In later HPD, the Ibsen English. That is little on handed that if it's okay.
Thank you, Honorable McKay. Just wait. This is a very good way to come together and discuss this very important issue. Now, my committee here is hungry and it's past lunchtime. It's almost dinner time. Unless if you guys want to buy us dinner. We'd like to go to lunch here, but I'm going to go to Mr. Halona, and when we come back, we'll have Honorable McKay.
Chair, members of the committee, I'd just like to recommend language. I think it's kind of confusing of how we're trying to put what's required versus what we want done together. And so let me just read what I'm recommending. And then if not, I'll go eat lunch and maybe come back and I'll revise it. Before commencement of any energy development projects utilizing the nation's energy resources, the developer or project manager shall consult with local leaders or in NHHPD to conduct the proper ceremonies, prayers, and other rituals are conducted to maintain the Navajo people's great covenant with the deities. By doing so, the nation shall strive to maintain a proper balance with the natural world.
Thank you. Michelle? Could you respond? Would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. I know, I knew that Mr. Halona would come through. He's so he's my ja, so I think we're amenable to the language. So I don't have any objections. It's more clear. It states the purpose of this section. So
Okay,
I think we're
thank you.
amenable to it.
Dr. Shabala, make it brief. We're going to go to lunch after you're done.
Yes, and the questa the shajagi. Ashi not so hasla. Chutanani nido. Hashi deep sa the shajai bin nachin. Hadani edo Joshi banda edo ishi. Bani dlau bano slano. Shin junago sas kendo ka. So do here banda tinigi. Doshanat I chairman is in Nigita. Yat to kuidashi in sa case. In long ya sa in the no long, but sa in the need long. Is sad in Junago. Had it on Nilo, bears Ani. Had it on Nil. Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Shabala. It is now 1:46. We'll be back in an hour. We'll probably have the second part of this to complete. So when we come back in an hour, we'll continue moving on till we reach about 5 o'clock. Yeah, we'll recess for an hour. Thank you very much.